Hello ADHD tribe, and welcome to what I hope will be a reoccurring video series. I was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and since then I have found engaging and hearing other people's stories extremely beneficial, so I just wanted to put mine out there, and hopefully you can find some use or comfort from my journey and from my experiences. So a little backstory, I am 34 years old, and I was officially diagnosed about a month and a half ago. I did not actually go in to seek a diagnosis for ADHD. I actually did not even think that could be a thing that I had. I originally went to see the doctor because I have suffered from depression and anxiety for most of my life, and it was in a very dark period for about a good 2 months, and I was unable to focus, especially on work. It was affecting my work quite a lot. And when I explained all this to the doctor ended up referring me to see a psychiatrist who then gave me the diagnosis. So why didn't I think I have ADHD earlier? Well, straight up the lack of knowledge and understanding. I actually had no idea what ADHD was, or what I thought ADHD was. It turned out to be completely false. And I'm finding that to be a reoccurring situation among almost everyone I tell and everyone I talk to about it. So quite honestly, I just thought I was incredibly unique, like no one would ever understand my brain or me fully, and I was just going to be alone for the rest of my life. Like, I really struggled with relationships, both friendships and romantic, for countless reasons, and I also just felt like I was incredibly lazy, as thinking differently than others is incredibly taxing, especially when you're forced to live in a society that is geared towards that way of thinking. Like, I definitely struggled in school, and I've struggled in work, and I've struggled in relationships, as I already mentioned, and I could always just see other people accomplish things so easily, but I'd always struggle with motivation in general just to complete anything, or even start anything. I'd end up getting flustered and frustrated as there were so many things I wanted to do, and so many things I needed to do, and I couldn't bring myself to do any of them, or if I could do any of them, I wouldn't be able to do them for very long, or I just end up hyper-focusing certain things for a very long period of time, and some of them were definitely not as good for me, such as video games. I struggled with hypersensitivity in a number of areas, from being way more emotional than most people I knew, to not being able to handle stress at all, to even just light being too overwhelming, and noise and large crowds and people, and so I definitely considered myself as an introvert. I was also definitely what I would consider an overthinker. That was the best term I could find to describe it, where my brain was running a mile a minute and I was basically just along for the ride. And unfortunately that could lead me into some dark areas where my brain would just follow a dark path and keep repeating it over and over and over again, and it would also keep me up at night quite a lot. I would have a lot of trouble replying to people, both via messages like text and email, as well as verbally. I found oftentimes when I was talking to people, I would just almost lose track of my thoughts, and I would have to just pause for a moment mid-conversation and try and cycle back to think about what I was actually talking about before I lost sight of what I was actually saying, as well as just sometimes taking weeks or even months to reply to a friend's message. Thankfully, I have some great friends now. I definitely struggled with mood swings as well, as it was so incredibly easy to get frustrated trying to do something or trying to focus all these other tasks and just not being able to do it, especially as easy as other people would, or getting feedback from people not understanding why it wasn't easy. And so I just a sudden freak out outburst. So all of these things, combined with other things as well that I won't dive fully into at the moment, all added up, but I had no idea they were all symptoms of ADHD. As for what I knew, ADHD was just a hyperactive kid who couldn't sit still, and that was it. That was the definition I remember hearing really early on, and that is all the information I've ever heard about it until very recently. So finding out about it has been like flipping my entire world upside down. Suddenly everything makes sense, and it's been absolutely incredible and absolutely liberating as well. So I'm hoping other people have been able to feel that liberation as well. And honestly, it's just kind of a wonder that I did as well as I have throughout my life. As looking back now, it almost seems like a different person or a different life. Even just having the info and the diagnosis is like breathing fresh air for the first time. That said, it can be really hard looking back on my life knowing all this stuff now, because I can think about, oh, well, if I'd actually had this diagnosis when I was younger or when I was a teenager, even like 5 to 10 years ago, how much different my life would be now if I had known this stuff. That can honestly be pretty difficult to think about and come to terms with, but that is where counseling and support groups can come in handy. So I have been on Vyvanse, the stimulant medication, for about a month and a half now. I started at 30 milligrams and my psychiatrist raised the dose by 10 milligrams a couple weeks ago, and that has been the perfect level for me at the moment. The first dose was definitely a wake-up call, but it also left my system way quicker than I would have liked, and now it seems to last me the entire day, which is perfect. That said, it has also come with the realization that the medication, as much as it helps, is not a cure. It is actually more a helping hand than anything. It gives me the ability to actually not feel as overwhelmed by all the things that I know I need to do in order to help my situation. As there's common things that we all know, like we should eat healthier, and we should exercise regularly and meditate and all that kind of stuff, that are all helpful, but the untreated ADHD mind is really hard to convince to do those things regularly, as they are not the most stimulating things in the world. Plus, just keeping that routine and doing the same things every day is also just incredibly taxing and difficult. So where am I now? As I said, a month and a half in, I'm feeling a lot better. Still learning, still getting used to everything. There's so much information out there that I did not know. It's all been amazing to find out. The medication is definitely helping. I have dealt with some side effects for sure, which I might go into in another video and how to deal with them. But the longer I have been on the medication, the less the side effects seem to affect me. But as I said, it's definitely not a cure, so I'm still dealing with some of the frustrating aspects, especially now that I'm more aware of things. Like, I have so many different projects on my plate and I want to get to them all, but it can be really hard to actually sit down and convince myself to do them. Or I will do one for 5 minutes and then go do another for 5 minutes and then another for 5 minutes. And then one task that could normally take a couple of hours to complete will end up taking me days, just because I will be doing all these different things at once instead. So it's definitely a learning curve. And I guess one of the biggest things and most important things I have learned throughout this experience is that I am not alone. So I just want everyone to know that you are not alone. If you have ADHD, or even if you think you have ADHD, we're all in this together. Okay, so that's it for this first video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below, or suggestions for what you want me to talk about in the next video. Alright, until next time.